Hey, Uplifters. Welcome to the Uplifters podcast. This is Aranza Savas, and every week I get to talk to an amazing and inspiring woman to learn from her how she builds the courage to do brave things in her life and how she takes care of herself along the way. Today, I'm really excited to introduce you to my friend, Cat McKenzie. She's one of those people that just lights up every room that she enters. No matter how big her job gets, how many amazing, impressive people she interacts with, she makes everyone who meets her feel at home and safe and warm. She's one of those people that makes everyone feel like the most important person in their world. She's an executive producer at Good Morning America and ABC News, and she's really changing the game when it comes to what leadership in television looks like. Kat made history as the first Black woman to executive produce a primetime special for ABC News, while also being the first Black woman to hold an EP title at the network. But if you ask her about her success metrics, she's not going to talk to you about ratings. She's going to talk to you about kindness. Seriously, in an industry that is known for cutthroat intensity, Kat has built her career on the radical notion that you can be both successful and kind. Kat's going to open up about everything from navigating the moments when people disappoint you, because let's face it, we will always be disappointed and we will always be a disappointment. But she's also going to talk about how to find your courage when you're feeling really uncomfortable, how to build a network culture, how to build a work culture where everyone's voice matters. Her insights about leadership aren't just for TV producers. They're for anyone who's ever wondered how to stay true to themselves while creating real change in this world. So grab a cup of coffee and join us for a conversation about what it really looks like to lead with your whole heart, even when the stakes are high and the cameras are rolling. I am so freaking glad that you're here and that I get to hear your voice again today.
I am so honored that you asked me and that we can chop it up a little bit. This is exciting.
I mean, it's been so interesting. You know, we started this show because we wanted to talk to inspiring women. And I knew that that's what lit me up, but I really wasn't sure what this show is going to become. And now we're over 100 episodes in, and I've talked to dozens of trailblazers and pioneers and women who have created incredible change. And I knew pretty early on that one of the most important things we were going to talk about was how we take care of ourselves while doing good in the world, because it can be kind of exhausting, right, to pour into everyone else as an uplifter. What I didn't anticipate that we were going to talk about so much was courage.
Mm.
And how much courage it takes to keep showing up and doing brave things and to ask for what you want and to follow up after you ask and then to follow up again and to show up and honor what you want with yourself. And so I think it is in those two spaces, right? Having the courage to do big things and then taking care of our hearts and our bodies while we do big things, that we've really kind of found the conversation that needs to happen.
I love that.
And so as I was thinking about this conversation with you specifically, I guess the first thing I want to ask you is, when in your life do you feel like you've had to draw on the most courage?
That's such a great question. I mean, I feel like it's every day in some ways, right? But I feel like there are definite moments. I think for me, like the most courage comes when I'm disappointed, when an organization or a coworker or a friend has disappointed me, and trying to go back into all the things that we read about, right? It's not you, it's them. You know, what's going on in their life. Everyone has something going on with them, right? But I just had one of those disappointments from a colleague recently. And to your point, it's then having the courage or the inspiration or whatever to get up and go the next day. Because for me, I think it's, wow, like that thing that I wanted for me or for an organization or for the world isn't happening. And someone who I thought had the power to either back me up or make it happen didn't. And so that it's like a double whammy, you know, you're like, oh, this thing didn't happen. And this person that I thought I had in my corner And sometimes like that person still is in your corner, just not in the way. They show up in different ways. And I think, it took me a long time to learn that people don't always show up the way you want them to. They show up the way they can. And you have to be able to accept that. And sometimes, it's that person that like all those people in our lives that talk too much or drive us crazy. But sometimes the way that they show up is what you need. And you're like, man, I didn't want it from that person. I wanted it from that person. And you're missing the blessing and what it is, right?
Mm.
So I think for me, courage comes in those times when you've been really disappointed. And how do you get up and go the next way? And how do you chart the next path forward? How do you
Yeah.
decide whether to give up on whether that thing was? And are you charting a new course? Or is it, hey, it's just not time for that, but I'm going to keep that in the back of my mind because we're going to come back to that.
Yeah. What do you say to yourself in those moments?
I think for me, it's always those questions, right? 3, 4 years ago, Tom Hanks, I think, was up for an Academy Award, and the Hollywood Reporter did one of those roundtables, and he was talking, and one of the things he says stuck in my head, and he said, "This too shall pass." And the way he
Mm.
framed it was, he was like, when everyone's complimenting you and telling you you're great, this too shall pass. When you make a mistake and everyone's telling you you're the worst thing, this too shall pass, right? And in having that kind of mindset, I mean, look, there are going to be some things that are earth shattering to the core, right? A divorce, a death in the family, losing of a job. Those are hard to say this too shall pass, but they will, right? But the things that kind of I find get us stuck are usually those things that like maybe aren't going to matter in 5 years, or at least if you can think of it as like, what's the good in this? And this is happening for a reason, whether it's protection or to put me in a different place, to know that it's going to be okay. And I think what's really been coming to me I was just talking to a friend about this last week. It feels like, and I don't know if it's the age that we're at or the state of the world, that no day is either all good or all bad.
Mm.
I feel like in the last 3 weeks, I've had these days where there have been like incredible things have happened, right? Like people have gotten promotions, jobs, babies have been born. I've had a great meeting with the boss, but then something else has happened where the finance meeting didn't go so great, or somebody else had a family member who passed away. And we just haven't had a day where it can be all happy or all sad. And that's kind of even harder, I think, to react to. Because it's easy if you have a bad day to just go home, sit on the couch and be like, today's a bad day. I'm going to watch some TV. I'm going to eat some ice cream. Tomorrow will be a better day. And it's easy when it's a great day to be like, let's pour the champagne. Let's celebrate. But when it's kind of a medium day, you kind of don't know what to do, right?
Right. Well, and it's not even I feel like there's no flat days anymore.
Yes.
They're just peaks and valleys.
Yep.
It's so interesting too the way you worded this. There's a concept that I'm like endlessly fascinated with called the oscillating narrative. And it was this big research project that was done years ago by a university that explored the way people communicated and remembered their family histories. And so basically, the people who thought of their family histories as like, oh, we came over on the boat and everything was wonderful, or the ones who were like, we came over on the boat and everything was horrible. Those people were significantly less happy than the people who said, we came over on the boat, there were good times, there were bad times.
Sure.
And I think it's like that capacity to hold both of those things that creates resilience. But it was like, I asked Andy, who's known you now for 25 years,
Crazy.
I said, so when you think of Cat, what do you think of? And he said, well, kindness and joy. I mean, if there's a joyful moment, you want to bring Cat because you just know that she's going to amplify joy. He said, I was like, yeah. Everybody knows that about Kat. I was like, but what else really like speaks to the core of who she is? Not that kindness and joy aren't just like your essence. He said, it's her ability to seem at ease in any moment among any group of people.
I love that. I love that.
He was like, she leads without this sense of hierarchy, without this sense of difference, but with a deep ability to connect with people from all different walks of life. And I thought that was such a beautiful
So
way to
lovely.
describe who you are in the
That's a
world.
very lovely thing for him to say. Very kind, very kind.
It's very true. And I think anybody who's ever met you has felt that. But I actually think it's linked to what you just said.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I a couple of years ago, I had this whole thing about leading with kindness, and then I changed it to success with kindness because I think that there is this misnomer that you can be kind but not successful, right? Especially when you start talking about the business world and even, what we do and the bosses that we work for and et cetera, et cetera. And I think that there is a unabiding faith, and it's not necessarily, for some it's religious, for some it's spiritual, for some it's just a faith in the universe that, like, if you do good things are going to come back to you. And I firmly believe that. I also firmly believe that there is good in kind of everybody. It may be really hard to find it at a lot of times. Um, and I think over the years and through therapy and reading, I think I've gotten to a point where I don't really believe that people want to have ill will, which I think is a really hard thing to kind of overcome, especially if you get caught up in the news, but that people are just really trying to do the best that they can. That doesn't mean that you're a pushover. It does mean you still have to set boundaries. All those things still come into play in that. But I think if you come at it from a sense of positivity or from a sense of that we're all kind of rowing the boat in the same direction, and that, like, generally is just like in life, like everyone is just like trying to get up, breathe a little bit, have a little bit of joy, take care of what they have to take care of, have a roof over their head, like basic necessities, and then to do good work. And I think in creative pursuits, that's where it sometimes gets messy. And what we do is such a mix of left and right brain, right? Like, television news is like, there's the right brain of you that you're a timer and you're an organizer and you're going to get the crews out and you're timing a rundown and all that stuff. But then there's this left brain tug of like, I want it to be creative and interesting and I want to add music and I want the piece to look like this and I want the show to look like this and the graphic and this and that. And sometimes those can be very much at odds with each other, right? And I think dealing with people is the same way, right? Like, some people that you meet in life are very like cookie cutter, straight, how they like to have things handled. Some people have a lot of anxiety. Some people are just like, I want to fly by the seat of my pants. And I think knowing that at the end, all those people just kind of want the same thing. It's how do you play to their strengths, right? Whether it's in leadership, you can't have a team of all one way, right? You need kind of both. And I think, I've learned this so much in like doing what we do for a living, being a television news producer, because it is a team sport. And look, there are things that I'm really, really good at. There are things that I'm okay at, but I don't really love to do. And it's not really my jam. Like, I don't need like the Excel spreadsheet to be all different colors and all this stuff. I don't need the grid. I kind of keep it in my head. But like, there are people on my team who are really good at that, who love that. And their being so good at it makes me a better executive producer because everything's more organized or this or that, and knowing how to kind of assign people, but also letting those people work with people that aren't like them. So we're getting the best product. And I think life is kind of the same way. Like, you can't have all friends that like chocolate. You got to have some that like vanilla ice cream too. Otherwise it gets kind of boring. And so that's kind of how I live life. I try. I also heard something I think that's really important because of where we're at in the world. We had someone on the show. This person said, when you do your gratitude, it's got to be something that you're grateful for that happened in the last 24 hours. And that really changed my mindset. When you get up in the morning, it's easy to be like, I'm grateful for my friends and then like move on with the day. But if you have to think about the last 24 hours, what's one or two things that you're grateful for, that really boils it down to like, we're just taking it one day at a time. And it kind of, for me at least, takes the anxiety that sometimes I feel in the morning when I get up and being like, oh, how am I going to do X, Y, and Z this week? So I think those are some of the things that I use. Besides like chocolate and sleep that tend to keep me going. And I still don't sleep as much as I should, but I have learned that sleep is key.
The theme that is emerging for me as I listen is a real sense of presence and acceptance. And so instead of trying to make people something different than they are, make a situation something different than it is, there is this sense of openness to what is here. And how do I work with what is instead of trying to force something to be what it isn't? And I hear it in both the way you talk about disappointment, but also that success really is in connecting. It is in collaboration and playing to each other's strengths.
Yeah. And if you think about what we're in danger of now it's losing that connection. I was in Paris with my mom about a year ago. We went someplace for dinner, and next to us was a group of adults. I think it was 3 males and a female. And they got together every Tuesday night for dinner at 6. They didn't work together. They were friends from wherever. It wasn't like a 4-hour event. They had an hour dinner. They got caught up with each other and they left. Like, we don't do that anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I think we're seeing the same thing in offices as we're getting people to come back. We saw that people that kind of were entry level in the pandemic haven't grown as fast as we want them to grow, right? There are things they don't understand. Kids come in to interview and they can't look at you because all they are used to is TikTok and they can't hold a conversation. We're seeing all these things. And I think with AI and all this stuff, how do we use the tools but not lose the humanity? Everyone wants to write better. Everyone wants their grammar checked. Everyone wants to get the cheap trip. You can go into ChatGPT. But how do we not let those kinds of things replace the, hey, I'm going to sit down with you and tell you about my trip to Paris and all the different things I did, as opposed to just getting a computer to do it for me, right? I think connection is just so key. And it's interesting because I think us extroverts crave it and will find it anywhere. And for the introverts, it's so easy for them to just sit and but what the extroverts kind of need the introverts because they also calm us down and like show us a different side of life and stuff. So I think the next like 5 years, especially between business and social and how we're being social with each other, is going to really be interesting to watch. And I can push some of my friends to go out, and I think we're seeing the resurgence of book clubs, and there's like a dad group that goes walking in Brooklyn that we just did a story on, and dinner clubs, and you're seeing people go away from the dating sites and all these different things that I keep getting spammed with. So I think it'll be very interesting in the next 5 years to see kind of where we're at as a society.
Agree. And I think everything you're saying reinforces too why we need diverse circles and we need more loose ties with people that have different ideas of the world than we do. And actually, for us, having lived in our precious little crystal bubble in Brooklyn all those years where everyone believed the same things. We all reinforced each other's belief systems. Living here in a town that has much more diverse political and economic landscape, it's been so helpful, honestly, because I think when you talk about difference, part of what I'm hearing is a reflection of my own experience here, which is this sense that I realized I had in the back of my head this image that when people were putting out their Trump signs, they were saying, "You're not safe here."
Mm-hmm.
But I was thinking this week again, I was like, I wonder if that's true. Or are they just saying, I want to feel safe here?
I think, one of the things I love is I'm on a couple of boards, and I always say this, like when I go to like my school board meeting, like what I love about it is no one's in television. No one even has a clue of what I do. And we're talking about real world issues, right? We're talking about the teachers that are working for us. How can we pay them more and give them better insurance? We're talking about the kids that come to the school. How are we making sure they're getting a great, experience? And, oh, we need to start a choir because X, Y, and Z, or, oh, we're bringing this into this school. And then we're talking about, we have a building and how do we take care of the building? Like, it's all these things that are like normal, everyday things. But you have this group of people that have all these different experiences, from lawyers, doctors, people who send their kids to the school, scholarship recipients, all of it. And together we come up with an idea of how to fix a problem, right? And we don't always agree, right? But the end goal is always the same. And I think, it's it can be very easy, especially with the way social media is, to point people out being the boogeyman before you even talk to them. And you have to have your boundaries and know what kind of energy you want to let into your life. But that has nothing to do with political party, right? The people that believe the same thing as I believe that I don't want in my life at all because their energy is bad, right? And I think there are ways for us as communities to come together and figure out those things that we agree on and work on them together. Because at the end of the day, we all have the same kind of end goal. It's just how we get there, right? And it's about seeing that there are going to be some ideas that somebody has that may not agree with you on A, B, and C, but on this one thing that you guys both agree on, they may have a better way than you, and being able to acknowledge that. And that way, when there are the disagreements that come up for whatever the reasons are, with their religious, political, just disagreement, you're still seeing that person as a human.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that we started saying at work was we were coming out of the pandemic was like, pick up and call somebody, go walk up to somebody, because we were finding people were being short with each other. Well, it's very hard to be short with someone who you actually are looking in the eye, right? It's very hard to be short with someone who you've had a cup of coffee with, and you know that they like chocolate croissants and you like almond croissants. Suddenly you see that person as a person, and maybe, you're having a disagreement, but you're going to treat that disagreement in a much different way than just, this is someone I don't know.
Right. You're going to treat them like a human and not like an idea.
Yep.
So I think this translates very directly to how we create more powerfully diverse and inclusive workforces. And I know that's something you're really passionate about. And even as you talk about playing to each other's strengths, how do you empower different voices and opinions?
One of the things that I found is that because I am so big and gregarious, that I have to allow time for one-on-ones, because not everybody feels comfortable talking in front of 30 people. And so allowing that extra time as a leader for someone to feel that they can come in the office and maybe just have that one-on-one time, or not to be upset if someone emails their suggestions instead of saying them in front of the group. And then I think it's really important when we talk about is that one of the things we try to practice is best idea always wins, no matter where that idea comes from. And if that idea comes from someone who's more junior on the staff, how do we make sure that they're being able to follow their idea as it comes to fruition? And sometimes that might mean juggling a schedule or that person working a little extra. But how are we making sure that they're seeing it and that the execution of that idea, that may have changed a little bit, but how are we keeping the spirit of what they intended in the final product? Or, and if we have to make a pivot or a change, so they're seeing why we're making it, how we're making it. And I think when you can do that, and when you work in a big organization, the other thing that we try to do, we don't always succeed, is like, someone may have an idea that's not great for your section, right? That idea may work better in someone else's section. How do we get that idea to that other person, and then again allow them the experience of seeing it through, right? It's easy in news. There's some stories that might be better for Nightline that aren't as good for GMA3. How are we making sure that Nightline gets it? And if they decide to go with it, the person that actually, thought about it on a different platform is being able to follow through and see it. So they don't feel like they've lost control, or like, oh, I had this great idea, and then somebody ran with it, right? And it's not only editorial, right? I mean, sometimes people come with better ideas of operational. Here's a better way for us to cut video. And how are we making sure that we're listening to those ideas? And I'm not perfect at it a lot of times, but it's just, it will tell you that tend to be like, at first kind of like, no, 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 no. And then I listen to it again. And then I start to ask questions, and it's like breaking down the walls, trying to be better at it. What I think surprises me the most as a leader, because I consider myself such a person of the people, is when people are like, well, we were afraid to tell you something. I'm like, I never get mad. When have I ever been mad? Like, cranky, but mad? I'm like, but people still have that, well, you're the boss and we don't want it. Me, that's a hard one to rectify in my head, because I just consider myself just Cat. I'm not a boss. I'm not a boss. I'm a cool boss. But so it's reiterating, even with some people that have been with me on the show that I'm on for the last 5 years, please come to me with ideas. I might be a little hesitant at first, but you got to keep coming at me. Don't be afraid I'm going to get mad. I'm never going to get so mad that something bad's going to happen. What's the worst thing that can happen? It's also that everyone needs to be managed in a different way, right? Different personalities. There's some folks who come from large, gregarious families that there was arguing all the time. There are other folks who come from quieter places, and maybe their tradition, their culture is much quieter, much more to not confront the boss. And so how do you mix those? Because you never want to make sure that the loudest people are the only ones being heard.
Mm-hmm.
And that can be really easy to do, right? And so it's, how do we fix that? And it's not just me. I have a great leadership team underneath me that follows me into the fire every day. And I'm grateful for them every day, because they listen to some of my crazy ideas and actually make them happen. But you also can't lead people who don't want to be led. Now, if they don't have a little bit of buy-in for what you're selling, it's never going to work. And so I feel very fortunate that I have a team that realizes that everyone has a job to do, and that we're going to make it as fun as we can, when we can, but also do a really good job and be successful.
Yeah. And I suspect, as you were saying, that your message to them about what success looks like is pretty unique. How do you describe that to your team?
Yeah, so I always, I don't talk about ratings.
Uh-huh.
I talk about kindness, and I was really, really, because of experiences that I had here and other places, and kind of knowing where we were as an organization at the time, I was really strong when I started that our number one thing was going to be kindness. I don't hire jerks, and we're going to be kind. And in the early time, it was calling out those instances, and not like calling out in front of like 30 people, but like being like, hey, calling people aside, being like, I saw that email exchange. I think we can do this differently. Really telling people like, you're hard on the furniture, man. Like your ideas are great, but I need to see you. And by calling that out, and then in the large group setting, being like, hey, we just got through whatever it was, covering a tornado, covering the Oscars, and man, it was great and the numbers are great. But what I'm really proud about is that, we did it with kindness. And I think I end everything with that. I believe from experiences that I've had with some really famous people that you can tell the difference when it comes from the top down. And I've done some really big interviews with some big people who were very kind. And you can tell because every single person you deal with, from their assistant down to the security guard, treats you in a different way. And you're like, wow, that's coming from all the way up there. And that's why this is the way it is. And that's why this experience has been great. And even though I'm just a little part of their day, they made me feel like $1,000,000. And so I'm very cognizant in praising that when I can. We have a thing called Shout Out Thursday where we let anyone shout out anyone on the staff. It allows people to not only show brilliance and excellence, but also to compliment people that wouldn't necessarily always get complimented, right? They aren't always number one on the call sheet or the anchor of the show or whatever, but trying to do all that. I hope we succeed. I think we do most days, but now it's like, how are we keeping it going, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think you're in a particularly intense pressure cooker every day. And the time is the time, and you have to fit with the time, and yet the time keeps changing. And when you talk about like resistance to new ideas, right? Which is completely understandable given the type of environment you're in, that if somebody's like, hey, I have an idea, let's do it this way. I think anybody's immediate reaction would be like, whoa, hold the phone. Nobody got time to change.
Yeah. And look, I've had some things that weren't successful. Like I wanted to start this new kind of like computer system that was going to track all these things. And we had this company come in and I showed it to the senior leadership team and they were like, we don't want to do this. And I was like, but it's going to make X, Y, and Z better on the back. And they're like, this is extra work. We can't do it. And I had to like, okay, if that's where we're at, that's where we're at. And there are times that folks have come at me and I've been like, I don't know if that's going to work, but like I have to think in my head. And I have a sign in my old office and in my new office today, but it's a Bayard Rustin quote from the movie. And I think it will kill no idea before it's born. And I try to keep that in my head. So even when I hear those ideas that kind of make your skin crawl, like, oh my God, this is never going to work, try to hear them out, try to figure out, is there a way we can make it work? Or maybe there's a way to twist it or turn it, or there's a part of it that's really good. And then how do we implement it? I think the other thing that I've learned too is like, I don't have to answer everything right away.
What?
I know. Like, I don't have to answer everything right away. And sometimes it's okay to think. And sometimes it's okay to just let everyone think and not fire back something right away and kind of see how it plays out and then jump in if I need to. But that was, especially being in our business, a really hard thing for me to be like, it's okay to take a minute or a day. Like no one's like, if it's not something that's like happening right now, it's going to be okay.
That's a good filter too. If it's not happening right now, then it can wait. I was thinking about this very thing this morning and I was picturing vegetables simmering in a pot. Right? And like how
Yeah.
much softer they get and how much easier to chew
Yep.
they become after they've soaked up some water and some heat.
Sometimes if you just let it simmer, you come up with a different answer, or someone else comes up with a different answer and you didn't even have to. You don't have to take everything on. I think we all get in this like, you're on an 8-person email chain and you want to be the one to solve the problem or stop the problem before it starts. And like, sometimes you don't have to. Sometimes you really were just added for visual and you don't need to comment. And that's hard for a lot of us because some of us are like type A, we want to get it done, we want to help everybody, we want to fix it, but like it's okay. Like it's okay to take a minute. I love the vegetable idea because sometimes by the next day, either it's figured out or it's not as critical or you're not as angry because that person said something crazy in the email and you can have a response that's kind and thoughtful as opposed to just like firing back. So, and I always feel like when I do fire back too quickly, like I always regret it.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. I feel like somewhere along the way, we got this belief that there was extra credit for being fast. And there are some things where we need to think on our feet and we need to
Sure.
improvise. And once I think you realize that you are a creative and resourceful human being, you understand how to use that powerfully. And it's not the only skill that we have.
100%. And it's also like what you find is then you spend every day reacting, and then you're not thinking, right? You're not
No.
creating. You're not spending a little bit of time just being like, how do I really want to attack this problem? And then that's where the overworking comes. You spend all this day like answering 17 emails and texts on the phone. Then you get home and you're like, oh, well, now I have to think about that project that is due in 2 weeks because I really need to ideate on it and create. And now you suddenly worked 18 hours through dinner. You haven't called your mom. You haven't talked to your best friend or your husband. You haven't hugged your children. And you're just exhausted and cranky.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
There's
not good.
nothing left.
There's
And nobody around you learned how to do anything else either.
Exactly. 100%.
To
Yeah.
make it easier long term. Did you always know? Were you like that kid who was like the natural leader? Did you like sense that you were going to be the big boss?
No, I think I was just always like extroverted and loud.
Mm.
Look, I grew up in Minnesota. I grew up very fortunate. I went to a private school, but there were 3 Black kids in my class of 92. So like everyone knew who you were. There were 10 of us. I don't know if I ever saw myself as a leader, but I think I've always seen myself as someone who can get the job done. And being a producer is being a leader. And I think just the more I got into it, I don't necessarily know if I would have called myself a leader until like 3 or 4 years ago. I never like felt that. I think maybe I've grown into the title. But when you think about it, I've probably been leading like all the time, you know? So, but for me, I think it was always just doing a good job and how do we get the job done and how do we bring the team together? I probably have always considered myself more of a coach than a leader. Like, let's bring everybody together and coach them up. And half the quotes I use are from Deion Sanders when I talk to my team. So go figure.
It's in a way just a shift in perception. It's you were doing these things all along, but then giving it another name.
Yeah.
I think also opens up the potential for you to say like, well, if I'm a leader, what else will I do?
Right. And it's also sitting in different spaces. You know, they always say like when you get promoted, you want to do your old job and not your new job. And so it's being able to sit in different spaces in different groups and use that leadership in a different sort of way. And claim it in a different sort of way. Like I'm here, I have this title for a reason. I'm in this meeting with like-minded individuals who may have my title or higher titles, but I'm here for a reason. And am I making sure that the values that I have that I think, you know, we should have as a group, and this is whether it's work, whether it's a board that I'm on, are articulated and we're doing the right thing in the right manner and we're doing right by all the people that need us to do right by them. And I think sometimes it's really hard in corporate America. You know, it's not kind of the way that most places are built. And so, you know, I mean, I think the other thing that we do as leaders and as people to keep our tanks full is also like figuring out when to fight and when not to fight. As long as your principles are not being crossed, it's okay to let someone else take the fight and stay back on this one, support, and also realize that life is a marathon. And so not everything can be the final sprint. And you have to balance it out. So for some people that are young and passionate about what we do, it's hard to be like, man, just let this one go because there's going to be a bigger one that we're going to need you for. or let's keep this one in the bank.
Mm.
And it's finding those balance. And no one teaches you how to, like, to be corporate, right? It's not a class in, like,
No.
how to hang out with other VPs and make sure that, you're getting your thing across and they're getting their thing across. And so, I think some of it for me is like, I came back from a bunch of big meetings and I was like, I don't love this, like, corporate, whatever you want, espionage, whatever you want to call it. Like, this is hard. Like, this is like a lot. But it's important, if you want to affect change, you got to do these things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And to stand up, even if you don't feel totally comfortable or confident
Yes.
in the how.
The thing that I love, and I heard Madison Keys say this when she won the Australian Open. She said, I had to be comfortable with being uncomfortable. But not only that, I had to get comfortable with doing my best work when I feel uncomfortable.
Oh.
And that to me was like light bulb, right? It's like, I know I'm going to have anxiety. I know I lost the last final I was in, but now I'm in the Australian final again. I am uncomfortable as hell, but I am still going to hit an ace.
Uh-huh.
And I was like, oh, that's so good. Because I think, especially women, people of color, as we work up the ladder, there's so many times when we are put in uncomfortable positions that we still have to excel. And if you can get your mind in that, yeah, you know what? Sometimes someone's going to say something that might rub me the wrong way. But I need to be able to still be the best me I can be, even when I'm feeling uncomfortable, even when I have anxiety. I got to be the best. Even when I know it's not going my way, I still have to be the best for myself. And then if you're a leader, for my team, for my family, for my whatever.
Well, I think probably what she's saying there is like, in those moments, I can't let all my thoughts get in the way of me being present in
And
this
great.
moment.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I think for women, for human beings in general, our fears, our feelings of disappointment, as you described in the beginning,
Yeah.
all of those stories are what get in the way. And for me, what I try to say to myself in high pressure situations where I can't control everything, which is all the time, I try to just say, my job is to just listen. And I always know what's right if I can just stay in listener mode. What are you saying to yourself or trying to do so that you can be your best self?
I think it's all of that. I mean, I think it's listening. I think it's keeping the ego in check. Like, you came in there thinking you had the best plan. Everyone's going to, do your thing, and they didn't, and being like, okay. And I think the other thing is, I tell all the young people in my life they should read The Power of Now, is really being like, it's not me. Like, if someone's being mean to me, or if someone just spoke over me, or if someone like took my idea and said it in their own words, but it was really my idea, it has nothing to do with me. It has more to do with them than it has to do with me.
Mm-hmm.
Because otherwise you get to taking it personally, or that anxiety reels up and you're like, oh, but that person just said that idea and they're closer to the boss. Now they're going to think that they did exactly what you're saying. And then again, you're not listening. You're not contributing because you're trying to say what you think they want to hear instead of how you really feel or what you really think. And also realizing that sometimes it's okay to not have anything to say, right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes you walk into something and it's not what you thought it was, or we talk a lot about pre-meetings. Half the room had a pre-meeting that you weren't invited to, and you can tell that this train is going on a track that you did not think it was going down. And, and being like, you know what? That's all right. Okay.
Yeah.
This too shall pass, right? Like, something else is going to pop up.
Mm-hmm.
And I also think that, I think it's hard when you're younger to think this. When something doesn't happen, as opposed to being like, oh man, that thing didn't happen, is that didn't happen, but it's making space for something else to happen.
Yes. Yes.
And so, like, it's okay to be hurt. It's okay to be disappointed, but know that that means you have space for something else.
In order to believe that, though, we have to reflect on what comes next. Because so often, like, we say these things to ourselves, but then we never reflect on when it actually happens.
Yeah.
And so we cheat ourselves
Yes.
of the
The
opportunity to
win.
believe our own stories that are helpful. Forget to reflect on the
Totally.
wins. Yeah.
Totally. I've had times where I've bet on myself, and in doing that, something great happened later. And I just think that your heart, when you're completely listening and you're in it, you're going to know what to do. You're going to know how to feel. And if you can turn off the noise, which is hard to do for most of us, you're going to be okay. You're going to be able to do the things that you want to do in the way that you want to do them and not have that kind of regret, like, oh, why did I say that? Or why didn't I say that? And I really try to believe that. It's not easy. None of it's easy, right? And there are days that like I completely fail 100%. But I try to realize that, the space is there for a reason.
And you are the one in the position to make something of it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Or to close the space.
Yeah. Or to
with
close
all those
it. Or to
thoughts
be
and
like,
fears,
okay,
right?
this
Like,
isn't right.
yeah.
This isn't for me. I'm going to walk away and that's going to be okay too. Those things can be difficult to get to in the moment.
So one of the things I've been trying to do in my own life lately is do one scary thing every single day. And as I keep saying, that is not cliff diving scary.
Love it.
It is like writing an email scary. And so I found very quickly that my threshold has changed in terms of what actually scares me, and what I now need to do in order to feel brave has shifted. But what's something brave that you are going to or could do this week?
Oh my God, this whole week. This is a big week. Well, for me, which is weird, like I am traveling by myself to New Orleans. I'm going to meet friends there, but I'm not working. I'm just going for fun.
Cool.
Which is like not a normal thing for me to do. My plan is to be very intentional to get out. And I know it just sounds weird because I am an extrovert, but like I also can like stay in a house and not talk to anyone. And so, but to really get out and see some old friends and those kinds of situations, I think it's always like there's pretty girls, there's pretty guys, and it's like they don't have the right clothes. I'm not pretty enough, but like my goal is to really get out every day and go to an event that I don't know anybody, that I'm on the list for, and just walk in and strike up a conversation, which that's kind of my bravery for the week.
Okay. Also extrovert here. Also, that sounds terrifying to me too.
Right? Especially I think at our age, not that we're old, we're just mature. In that so much of my life is spent around people that I know, love, and care for me. And so many of my social outings are with people. And so I don't meet other people because I have the best friends in the world. And so there's no reason. And so to kind of force myself to like just get out there. And the other thing is, especially with the pandemic, we've all closed so much. I think dating and restaurants are like a good example for life. The more you date, the more you meet more people, the more you find Mr. Right. The more you go for different job interviews, and not even job interviews, but the more you just talk to people in your industry, if you really love what you do, the more you might find that next thing. And so if your company isn't hiring, or they've had a hiring freeze, or you didn't get the promotion, you've already got this other network out there. And so you don't feel like it's the only thing. So often I think we get caught up in this is the only thing that matters. And oh my God, if I didn't, and then you forget there's still a big world out there, that loves you, it can use your skills in maybe a completely different way. And so that my scary thing is to go to some events on myself and make some friends.
I love that. What are you going to do about the thing that disappointed you recently?
I have decided that it's one of those that like it's in the book and there's a longer plan in that stream of that part of my life. And it's kind of like mental note, like, okay. And I think there's maybe someone that I won't trust as much, and that's okay too. Just keep that in the head,
Yeah. My mental note of the cat method here is slow down, which is hilarious given your profession, right? And how much of it is driven by intense urgency, but it is. Slow down, take that breath, put things in perspective, look for the data, and choose the next step forward.
I love it.
Yeah.
This is
it
great.
was really fun to talk to
so
you.
Fun.
I love your face. I love your voice. I love your story. I love your brain.
I got to get out to New Jersey.
Yes, please come visit us. That
I
would
will,
be such
definitely.
a joy.
I will definitely.
Thanks for watching the Uplifters podcast. If this inspired you, hit subscribe and tap the bell to stay uplifted. Give this video a thumbs up and share it with someone who needs a little lift today. Big love.
Painted water sunshine with rosemary and thyme. Dwell in the perplexing, though you find it vexing. Toss a star and hover, be your own best lover. Relish in a new prime, plant a tree in springtime. Dance with idle hindsight, bring the sun to twilight.